Welcome back to another episode of Day at the Dude Ranch. Check it out. We're drilling holes. Yes. In case you're wondering how I do this is how I do it. I drill the holes all the way through. Then I get them to size for the pots to fit. And then we flip it over. So now we know exactly where to put the cavity. So we're going to be cutting the cavity on this thing. We're going to be actually doing a lot on this episode. So stick with us. So we're going to be doing a lot of this high-speed stuff. Plus some real-time type footage as well, and a little bit of tunes, that kind of thing. But here we are getting the cavity ready, just basically routing it out via templates and router. And then, there we go. There's a big hand router. And so we're going to get this all set up and sand the body. Quite a lot of sanding, unfortunately. But, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. I kind of like sanding myself. It's therapeutic, but to watch somebody sand is as boring as all get out. Where'd that phrase come from? All get out? My mom used to say that. If anybody knows, please put a comment. If you know the origin of all get out. And if you can do that without Googling it, that would be even better. But this is it. It's just taking a little bit of meat at a time. I did start with Forstner bit. I just skipped that footage, but put some holes in there and then just cut out a little bit. And then now we're doing with the trim router is I'm basically making the little recess for the cover. And we're going to be making the cover plate, so let's check that out. That's kind of an interesting method of doing it. One of these days I'd love to plan this way ahead of time, but I'm just trying to get the grains to kind of match up enough because unfortunately where that cavity went, just took out most beautiful section of grain off that body. I'm sure some of you cringed when you saw me cut into it, but I know I did. So cut it to shape and then shape it to fit, and then that's what we do. Try to get it going. You can see it's a little thicker here. What I did cut out is the drum sander part where I did run it through a couple times to get the thickness down. Yep, and just get it as close as I can. These do end up with a little bit of wiggle room anyway, which is actually kind of nice if you've ever had to take one off and put it on. But I want it to fit well enough without the screws. And then that's the way I know I've done a good job. Now we're getting the bridge going. Or I should say bridges, or saddle pieces actually. So again, working off a 5-string, I decided, since that 3rd string is in the middle, that and the 2 end ones are the most important. So lining those up first, and then, I figured number 2 and number 4 should look somewhere in the middle of 1 and 3 and 3 and 5. And yes, I do practice what I preach. You saw me pull out the paste wax for the screw. Yeah, especially going into ash. Those little teeny tiny screws that we're using, nothing could bust it more than getting it stuck in a nice firm piece of ash. So you're going to see me do this in a little bit of hyperspeed, and then it's going to go even faster once I run through the rest. Now, I do have that little double stick tape because I put the spacer nut down with it. And just to hold everything in place, I've got the tuners fully loaded. I mean, they've got the nuts on them as well as the screws, so they're installed the way you would normally install them. But I'm not really winding the strings tight on them. I'm just getting them just taut enough that I can align the saddles. And it's a measure, measure, measure. Now here we go. This is going to be super high speed as I just set up the rest. And I'm just checking my spacing, making sure everything is good to the ruler as well as good to the eyeballs. Remember, those aren't necessarily the same things. Now remember, this is a 37-inch on the long end and 34-inch on the short end, and as we have learned that some companies have a different definition of what they call super long scale. And apparently there are certain string companies that don't like us that use 0 frets. A 0 fret will not work with those strings. I've got to change those. And we'll get to that later. So here's some sanding for you. Have fun. I'm just going to mount the plate so it doesn't fall out while I'm trying to do my job here. And this is the part I love. Look at that. The big long drill bit. Now here I'm just making that plate fit. And I left that part in there just so you can see I actually do put my tools away. And sanding. Now we're getting this thing ready for stain. We're going to be staining it here very shortly. And yes, I do like spraying my cavities black. That's no replacement for the paint that we're going to use here before we put it in the pickups. Now, even though this is getting active pickups, you don't need to use shielding paint, but I like to use it anyway. Now I'm sanding this to about a 220. Actually, I'm sure I'm sanding it to 220. And you notice I'm going back and forth between the random orbital and hand sanding. After using a random orbital, you want to follow it up with straight line hand sanding. Because otherwise, sometimes you'll get those little pigtail looking squirrely marks. And now let's hand it over to this guy for some staining.
Okay, so now we're going to get to making this thing stained black. So that's what we're going to do. And yeah, it's going to be fun. So first thing I like to do is take one of these little cups. I just put a little bit of moonshine in there. Not a lot, don't worry about putting it on the guitar like that. And then I'm going to take some of this India ink. And just a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. Especially when we're mixing it with the moonshine. And stir it up. Okay, so we've got this baby pretty much sanded. Oh, look at that. I got a little bit on my hand. We got it sanded down to 220. And now what I'm going to do is, you can see, just liberally apply this blackness. And I'm using just an old t-shirt here. Let's see what I can do to get it. There we go. And that's it. Just, when I say liberally apply it, I mean liberally apply it. Just get it everywhere. And the beauty of ash is that it's just going to soak up into those big grains so well. You can see it already. I like to start with the back first. That way it's easier for me to kind of secure my position, and as well as just making sure that if there's a mistake, as I've said before, anytime when it comes to staining or using shellac, even some type of these oil finishes, you'll notice your mistakes as you start applying it. You could already see there's a couple spots here I need to sand a little better, which, you know, I thought I sanded pretty well. But again, you'll notice those mistakes a lot more once you start doing this. Now I've got this mixed pretty thinly. I didn't have to go so thin with the D-nat. I really added a lot more D-nat than I needed to. If you thin it out really well and you come back and apply, you can have more control over it. Now we are going to do, the end grains are going to be a little more opaque, but we're going to play with that more with spray than we are with rub-on. hand applying like we're doing now, and I'll show you that step. So that's pretty much it. And I'm just pounding that black into the grains. See how I'm doing that? I don't know if you saw that right there. So now you notice how it's getting in that grain really well. And as I mentioned, there's some spots that have little cross scratches that I didn't sand as well as I wish I would have. But that's okay. We're going to get those in a moment. Not going to let them bother me. Just going to keep filling that up. Now you see those grains, how we got that to really blend in well. I think it looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to keep rubbing this in, rubbing this in, rubbing this in. Basically, I'm just going to empty that tub. One more little bit. There we go. Look at that. Now once we do this, I feel like I've got it pretty much emptied out of this fabric and onto the wood. And I'm going to let it sit for about 45 minutes. And yeah, so that was a good 45 minutes or so, give or take. And now we're going to do some sanding. Now here's how I like to do it when it comes to this kind of sanding. I'd like to go with good old-fashioned sandpaper. When I say good old-fashioned, I mean good old-fashioned. You know, the kind Grandpa used to use. None of this high-performance silicon carbide stuff and all this aluminum. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The fancy stuff that they sell nowadays for $70 a foot. No, we're talking about good old cheap stuff. And there's a reason. Because no matter what you do, this stuff's going to clog up big time. And even that high dollar stuff's going to clog up big time. So why use it?
Alright, so now let's do the front. So same thing, I'm just doing the good old-fashioned straight line sanding, although it looks like my hand's going in a curve. And yep, Moonshine, India ink, rub it on. We got this a little higher speed for you, I mean, because you've seen this done, so we're just going to get right through it, get to it. And yeah, get it on there, let it sit, sand it back. Use a little spray bottle, get a little water to kind of separate the grains so that the lower end grains hold the ink and the higher end grains let you sand them back. So it just separates the grains. We're going with an open grain finish on this. So in that, once I'm done finishing the clear coat and sand it, you're still going to see the grooves of the grain. We're not sealing it and making it look like it's under a 1/4 inch sheet of glass or anything like that. We're going to really let the wood just shine on this thing, even though we are going to be darkening it. So you'll see that here in a moment, going into the spray booth and going to be darkening it up with a little auto poly. And getting the neck going. Now I've already stained the neck a little bit. That is, as we noticed before, all mahoganies. So it's kind of pink and brown, and now we got a little bit of darkness going on it. And we're going to get the headstock going. I'm just using some shellac, some oils, and a little bit of sealer spray just to seal the color and get it in there. The neck is going to go through a lot of scuffing and sanding by the time we're all done and make an instrument out of it. Now here I'm just scuffing up the body. I've got a little bit of oil going on it just to preserve it and get that color to hold in before we spray. Okay, so here we go. We got the sticker going on. And I just seal it in with some CA, and then we're going to put clear coat on over that. So that's pretty much it. Now I've got a little bit of amber CA on it, and it's going to get a little bit of darkness too when we spray everything else. So it's going to look more like gray and black rather than white and black. Same thing with the lettering here. Obviously I'm going on with pure white. And then I put a little sealer on it. It's a workable fixative that I spray on there and then sand it a little bit and then come back and do it again. I do this about 3 times. So I've heard guys say before, that they're worried that my handwritten serial numbers and all that are just going to rub off. Yeah, not too likely. You're going to have to sand them off to get them off of there. And here we are in the booth. Now this is a clear coat that's made for matte finishes, but it's only matte if you mix it a certain way. So it's a 6-to-1 ratio. And see what I'm doing there is I'm just dripping it into that little bottle to get that nice airbrushed finish on the black fade. I found the best way to do that is to use an airbrush. Kind of interesting. Yeah, so that's how you get that airbrush look. Is you use an airbrush. Go figure. So you're going to see it go on pretty wet. It's going to look shiny. And it's going to do that because it's wet and because that's just the way this stuff goes on. The thicker you lay it on, the shinier it's going to be. Now the customer wants this thing to be very flat, matte type look. So what I do at the end, you'll see here, is I'm going to spray at a further distance. Now again, I'm just getting all the airbrush effects here. And then I'll be using the big bottle. But as I'm saying, at the end, when I use that big bottle, I'm going to be spraying from a distance so the droplets actually land pretty dry. And that's what's going to help give it that matte finish. But along the way, you're going to see it's a lot wetter, a lot thicker. And I've just got just a tint of gray in this just to kind of control it. Again, just like we did when we were staining it. If I did it too black all at once, I wouldn't be able to get any control out of it. Always use tack cloth in between coats. The stuff dries really fast when you go on really lightly like this. And that's it. These are the camera angles you're going to get from the booth, guys. So sorry if you don't quite get all the neck in there as well, but I did my best. And what can I say? I'm going to let you finish this out. Just all visual. I'm going to shut up, basically, is what I'm saying. Really do appreciate you all tuning in and watching these episodes. Next episode, we're assembling a guitar. This thing's going to be playable. All right, check it out. Thank you.